Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into, well, a really fascinating perspective on global power dynamics. Our source material seems to challenge some conventional wisdom. It suggests modern conflicts, these wars, aren't just military anymore.
Right, not just tanks and missiles. It's about narratives, sanctions, economic leverage, too, even, influencing minds.
Exactly. And within all that complexity, our sources highlight India.
Yeah, they paint a picture of India as rising, definitely independent, ancient, and somehow unshaken.
Unshaken, that's a strong word.
Yeah.
And the core claim is pretty bold, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The source essentially says India couldn't be defeated historically, can't be now, and won't be in the future.
Wow. Okay. So we need to unpack why the source makes such a powerful claim.
Precisely. We're going to dig into those arguments and pull out the key insights for you.
All right, let's do it. So the first big idea, I think, was India's strategic autonomy.
Yes, that's central, strategic autonomy.
And the source used this phrase, does not take sides, it takes stands. What's the real difference there, according to the material?
Well, it's crucial. The source points to the Russia-Ukraine war. Remember all the Western pressure?
Yeah, huge pressure to condemn and isolate Russia.
Right. But India kept buying affordable oil from Russia. And the reason given? Straight up, prioritizing its own citizens.
Okay. So a domestic imperative driving foreign policy.
Exactly. It's like saying, look, we're not just going to follow someone else's lead here. Our interests come first.
And the source actually says this independence, this thinking for themselves, is what scares the West.
So that's the implication, yeah? Because it doesn't fit the usual with us or against us model. It challenges those traditional alignments.
It really makes you think, what does that mean for how countries relate to each other going forward? It's not just about picking a side anymore.
It's a kind of 21st century non-alignment, perhaps, but more assertive.
Interesting. Okay, moving on from geopolitics, the source talks about India's democracy. And there's this irony noted. The West often promotes democracy, but the source argues India didn't just, import it.
Right. It stresses that India built its democratic institutions from scratch, its own way.
From scratch?
Yeah.
For 1.4 billion people? That sounds incredibly difficult.
Immense. You've got hundreds of languages, religions, cultures, yet the source says it functions.
How does it describe that functioning?
It calls it the largest and most chaotic in the world, which sounds like a contradiction, but maybe it isn't.
Chaotic yet functional.
Yeah, it points to peaceful power transitions, really fierce political contests, a media that argues about absolutely everything.
So the chaos is maybe part of the functioning, not a bug.
That seems to be the idea, an organic system that grew out of its own diversity.
It does raise a question, doesn't it, about how robust institutions can be when they grow organically like that, compared to being, say, imposed or copied.
Exactly. It implies a kind of inherent resilience, perhaps.
Okay, now this next point is really provocative. The force suggests the West has always been a bit uncomfortable with India. Not because India is weak, but because it's just so unique. What does the source mean by that? Uncomfortable how?
Well, the text says India just doesn't fit the Western model. It's not neat.
How so?
It lists these contradictions, not fully capitalist, not fully socialist, not pro-West, but not really anti-West either.
Okay.
Spiritual and scientific, traditional and modern, loud, chaotic, emotional, yet somehow incredibly stable underneath it all.
That's quite a list. So the conclusion drawn is what?
That India is, and I'm quoting here, too complex to manipulate, too ancient to brainwash, and too self-aware to be colonized again in any form.
Wow. Too complex to manipulate. That's powerful. It really forces you to think beyond those standard development models, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It defies easy labels.
And what stands out to you there? What's the core takeaway from that defiance?
I think it's the idea that this complexity, this refusal to fit a mold, isn't a weakness. It's presented as its fundamental strength, its defense mechanism almost.
Okay, and this strong sense of self, this uniqueness, seems to feed directly into how India approaches its economy.
Yes. The next section ties into that perfectly.
The source highlights India as one of the fastest growing major economies, but crucially, it says this growth isn't coming by copying the West.
That's a key differentiator mentioned. It's driven internally. Indian brains, Indian businesses, and Indian demand.
So internal drivers are key. Does it give examples?
It does. It points to India's digital public infrastructure as unique examples of leadership. Things like UPI, the payment system.
Oh, yeah. UPI is huge there, right? Instant payments everywhere.
Massive. And Aadhaar, the biometric ID system, and ONDC, this new open network for digital commerce. It's building its own digital rails.
Building its own rails. I like that phrasing. So it manufactures for the world, but not necessarily under foreign control.
That's the point made. And it's building this huge middle class, bigger than the entire population of many countries.
So the dynamic is shifting.
The source suggests the West once saw India just as a market to sell to. Now it's seeing it as a competitor. And maybe, soon, a model. That's the phrase used.
A model. That implies other countries might look to India's way, not just the Western way. That really shifts things, doesn't it? Building your own infrastructure, relying on internal demand.
It suggests a different pathway to economic power, one less dependent on external blueprints.
Okay, from the economic, the source then takes a turn towards something more philosophical. It talks about civilizational strengths.
Yes, this is a really deep point.
It argues you can beat a government, maybe overthrow a regime, but, and this is a quote, you can't kill a civilization that has lived for 5,000 years.
It's a profound claim about endurance.
But how does the source define this strength? Is it just an idea, or does it have real-world impact?
It's presented as very real, rooted in things like culture, spirituality, philosophy, family structures, dharma, this underlying sense of order and duty.
So intangible things providing tangible resilience.
Exactly. The source recounts how India endured through Mughals, British rule, devastating famines, partition, terrorism, huge traumas.
And the argument is
that every time it bleeds, it rises stronger. This resilience is its core power. The source contrasts it directly. The West might see power in missiles, but India sees it in this deep resilience.
Resilience is power. That's a fundamentally different way of thinking about strength on the world stage, especially over the long term.
Very different. And it's a kind of strength that's hard to counter with traditional power tactics.
Which leads directly into the next point, doesn't it? This idea that because of this unique resilience and identity.
The West has tried everything and essentially failed to fundamentally change or control India. That's the assertion.
What tactics does the source mention?
Oh, it lists quite a few. Obvious ones like colonization, economic pressure, but also subtler things. Media narratives, funding NGOs, trying social engineering, cultural influence.
A whole spectrum of influence attempts.
Yes, but the text claims every time the West thinks it's finally got India figured out, India just changed the game. It adapts, it pivots, it remains itself.
And the core reason given for this?
It's perhaps the most striking line in the analysis. You can't defeat a country that doesn't want to become you.
Wow.
India doesn't want to be Western. It wants to be India, and that's its greatest strength.
That really hits home. It pushes back hard against any idea of a single universal path for nations. What do you think we can learn from that? A nation just insisting on being itself.
It's a powerful lesson in self-definition, isn't it? Especially in a globalized world that often pushes towards conformity.
So, wrapping this all up, what's the big picture emerging from this deep dive? It's not just about India, is it?
No, I think it's using India as a case study to talk about power itself in the 21st century.
Right. Our source paints India as, well, unconquerable seems to be the word.
Yeah.
And it traces that back to the strategic autonomy.
The homegrown democracy, that complex, unique identity.
The independent economic engine, and this deep, deep civilizational strength we talked about.
Exactly. And the overarching argument seems to be that real enduring power today isn't just about military might or shouting the loudest in the media.
It's about what? Survival?
Yeah.
Independence?
The ability to survive, yes, and even lead, but independently, on your own terms. The source says India's been doing this for ages.
Standing when others collapsed, fighting when others were silent.
Rebuilding when others gave up, and growing, as the source puts it, not with help, but with heart.
Not with help, but with heart. That's quite poetic. It leaves us with a really interesting thought to chew on, doesn't it?
Definitely.
If India's strength, according to this source, really stems from its refusal to just copy-paste, from its deep self-awareness, what could others learn?
You mean other nations, or even individuals?
Both, maybe. What might anyone gain by truly embracing their own unique strengths, their own path, instead of always looking over their shoulder for external validation or following someone else's blueprint?
That's a fascinating question to end on. What does authentic strength really look like today?